All right, has everyone had a chance to look over the agenda?
Yes.
It is not on here, but we should do that. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Awesome. Now, has everyone had a chance to look over our minutes from November, which was very, very long ago?
Yes.
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 Okay. Any discussion, anything missing or incorrect? All right, is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Date, which November?
November 14th and November 19th, we'll do them together.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve them as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Excellent. All right, has everyone had a chance to look over the Dare County Board of Elections delegation of staff, to staff of preparatory steps for absentee ballots for the upcoming primary?
Yes.
Any questions about it? Any discussion? Kelly, do you have anything you need to say about it?
No, it's the same as last year's.
Well, actually, there is a different reference to the updated deficiency memo, because it was a slightly different memo that was referred to, so I didn't know if there was something in that that had changed. I looked at them, but didn't see a
No,
change that pertained to this. But I'm sure the state told you to change the reference to the newer numbered memo.
yes.
So,
She's smart.
we
All right,
just-
anything else? Is there a motion to approve this resolution as presented?
I move that we approve the resolution on delegation as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now, approval of the resolution of the Dare County Board of Elections, schedule of absentee meetings for the March primary. I know, John, you had a correction early on and that was made? Or,
I have, I will be absent the first meeting.
okay, which is next week?
Yes. I believe so.
I may will be
I
as
have
well.
an appointment that's been scheduled for months. Will not be able to attend this meeting.
Understood. Okay. Any questions or anything about that schedule? Anyone else have any issues? Let us
Are
know.
you looking at this schedule here
No,
or
the
just our
schedule
board meetings?
The schedule was.
Our board meetings.
Resolution was emailed. I didn't print it out.
Yeah, we pretty much are going to meet every Tuesday from now through March.
We should still have a quorum if Tammy's in attendance, so.
Yes.
I will not be here on the well, I might be here. I'll be here.
I'll be here remotely.
The 24th might be an issue for me in February.
Okay, we can work on that
Yes, yes,
later,
next week.
but we do need to know in advance for meetings that you will miss to make sure that we have the proper balance.
Yes.
Okay. All right, is there a motion to approve this schedule?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. You have before you a schedule of workers for the upcoming early voting. Where is mine? For the upcoming early voting schedule. Has everyone had a chance to look over that? It was sent out
January 16th.
earlier. And just a reminder, if you should mention anyone's name, please do not mention the party with which they are associated. Okay. Any discussion of this list? Any comments, Kelly?
I'll just let the board know that if you're interested in looking at the actual schedule, you can certainly get that from us. If you have some concern about party balance, we did work really hard to do that. We're at the mercy of who's willing to work and when. So we did do our best to get that balanced. Also, this is the slate method, which is allowed in the numbered memo for the appointments for early voting officials. And so that's the option we chose to do. You do not see Manio's Board of Elections site up here because that is considered an administrative site. And so those workers do not have to be appointed, but these two sites do. And the chief that you see listed is the chief. They have signed on to work the entirety of the time. But in the event that they are absent, that is why we have got some substitutions in there so that they can fulfill more than one role in the event that they need to, depending on the day. And so that's why you see this slate method here. So in theory, it's just been condensed, but what you have is 2 or 3 chiefs, you have this group of judges, and you have these groups of assistants, and those people would appear on each list. So I just put them together. And so it's up to you how you want to approve these appointments, but they should be appointed. So if you wanted to appoint them all as the slate, but this list will be public record. So that's up to you how you want to approve them.
I think we can approve the slate as presented. Does anyone have any objection to that? Rather than go through it individually or separate out?
And these names this list will be posted in our office.
Kelly, don't all of these people have experience having worked as judges in prior elections?
There are a few that are new. They were just recently hired or agreed, I should say, agreed to work in the event that you appoint them. There are a few, if you'd like to know who they are, but most of them have experience, and no one who is new will work with someone who isn't. But our chiefs and our judges, most of our judges are very experienced and have done this multiple elections.
We will have training as well
Yes,
prior to.
yes.
I'd move the acceptance of the slate as presented.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, any further discussion? Any questions about this? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Next up is a request from the mayor of Kill Devil Hills, John Windley. He has spoken with me several times. He has spoken with Kelly at least once. He is very concerned over the number of Collington voters who present to KDH to vote. There is some confusion because Collington is in unincorporated Dare County, but has a mailing address of Kill Devil Hills. So people do get confused about living inside the town as opposed to living outside the town. They get confused about who they're supposed to vote for. And yes, a number of voters do show up and try to vote at KDH who belong in Collington. The reverse is also true. And it is not the only precinct that experiences it. Manio has the same kind of issue with the whole north end of the island being designated Manio, but it's unincorporated Dare County. There's some confusion. People that live in Martins Point, do they belong in Kitty Hawk? Do they belong in Southern Shores? Their voting precinct is Southern Shores, but they don't vote in municipal elections. So it's not the only place, but there are quite a few of them. We have a system in place with poll workers to try and get people out of line and where they belong if they do show up at the wrong place. Notices are put out as to voting places, and voting places are printed on your voter registration card. Mayor Windley wants to have some kind of large map up that shows the line so that when people come up, they can immediately see that they live on the other side of the airstrip, which is the main marker for the town. It's costly. And I honestly, in my heart of hearts, don't think it will change anything.
Can we put it up on the website, Sandy, in terms of, would that be some way to say we were providing the information for somebody who wants to check
I think,
without going to the same level of expense?
We absolutely can. The issue would be, if you've been to our website, it's a massive amount of information. And so many things that are important to the entire county go on that main page. And so, you know, would it get lost? I don't know. You know, we might could talk with PR about maybe a running banner for a couple of weeks that just catches their attention. We can look into something like that that doesn't take away from all the content. The other issue that I have is what we don't want to do is discourage voters from coming to the town hall that live in Collington because it is an early voting site. So the other year where we have midterms and, you know, presidential elections, they can go and vote there during the early period. And so would it cause, my concern would be, is that would it cause confusion? And they're thinking that's not where they go to vote. And then when they find out it is, then they're like, well, I couldn't vote last time. And so what it boils down to is that they can't participate in a municipal because they don't live in the town of Kill Devil Hills. And I also, in talking with Mayor Winley, I asked, was he getting an extensive amount of phone calls? And he said no, that what he noticed was the voters were coming and asking him questions as he was electioneering and the other candidates were electioneering. They were asking questions, but most of them continued on into the precinct. And our poll workers are trained to handle the question. And most of them take it for what it is and they leave. And then others, they may not be very happy with it, but it doesn't change the fact. And I'm not so sure that a sign is going to stop them as much as when they physically enter the polling site and they told, I'm sorry, you just don't have a ballot to vote. And for most of them, I think that's what it takes, is that physical confrontation with a person who says, I can't give you a ballot. I don't have one to give you. And so I'm not so sure a sign will stop them any more than a candidate. So again, it is costly. I don't know if Kill Devil Hills would want to take on some of that cost. But I would think since Collington or Dare County voters, we would need to take some of the cost as well. And then you're looking at, anytime you have signs, you need something that's weatherproof, that's going to be anchored down. It's windy. We have trouble with signs all the time. So, you know, there's some logistics for going that route instead of maybe beefing up our media, you know, radio ads, things on the website, getting PR to do more press releases. Unfortunately, Collington is a really bustling place. It's pushing 4,000 registered voters. And so you've got people in and out constantly. And if they're new and their address says Kill Devil Hills, they may just need to go that time and be told, sorry, I don't have a ballot for you, just because they just don't know until they know. So I don't know if a sign is a solution.
I
in my
don't
opinion.
know that it is either. Honestly, having been chief at that precinct for 9 years, the problem is cyclical as people move in and out. They do not, unfortunately, a lot of people simply are overwhelmed with the amount of information and they don't read it. So the system that we have in place of making announcements along the outside line on busy elections and inside as well seems to work well to shorten the time that they're waiting only to be turned away. You do have people that I will tell you will look you right in the face while you explain it to them, ask where Collington voters are supposed to vote. They're told liberty and how to get there, and yet they will stay in that line till they get up to the counter, and then they're angry. We tried, but nothing is going to convince them otherwise, unfortunately. So
And it-
I think it's very kind of Mayor Windley to be concerned about our workers having to do this extra job, but I think it's just part of that precinct. It's just the way it is.
I'd like to think that we could do something like a banner, Kelly, that you said, just to put something on the website for a period to alert
Right.
those people who live in the unincorporated areas of Dare County to check their polling location. Because if it doesn't just apply to the Collington voters, there's
True.
just more Collington voters
Mhm.
right now than in some of the other unincorporated areas. So I think if we could run a little banner for people who are in the unincorporated areas for some period, at least we'd be responsive to the concern that if people took the effort to look online, they could see something reminding them that
Yes.
unincorporated areas of the county have designated polling locations, and they can't just sort of freelance and decide where they'd like to vote.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent
PR did a
idea.
great job. They put out several things over the last municipal press release and little things on their website as well, their social media as well as ours, to just remind people that this was a municipal, it was the 6 municipalities, and the sample ballots only show. But again, when your address has Manio, Southern Shores, or Kill Devil Hills, it is confusing. So we can certainly do that. And I will just remind you guys that they're not during, most of the people vote early in regular elections. And so the turning away is really just for the municipals, and then on election day where the traffic is a lot less. Because during early voting on even years, they can certainly go there. So you do have to kind of be careful with that balance, that you don't make them feel like this is a banned place for them, because it is our early voting site, and we want people to have that opportunity to come and vote early and feel like they have a place to go. And like I said, that's thousands of people that you kind of have this delicate where you can almost put so much out there that they don't feel like that is their place, and it is during early voting.
And the contact with poll workers, I think, helps in that the explanation that you can vote here during early voting, but on election day, you must vote in your precinct. So that personal contact probably is a lot more important than any sign could ever be.
I think so too, because they can ask a question and get a little bit more explanation than a map.
Mhm.
So anything we would put, let's say online, a banner, would direct them just for election day voting.
Or if it's a municipal, that they are not eligible. So it would have to kind of, again, sort of tailor to the election that's happening at the moment.
We don't have any municipals coming up, right? So for
They're
this-
odd years.
Yeah,
So the next one would be November of next year.
okay.
And yeah, so I guess, I don't know that we have a lot of issues on election day in a even year. I think it's mostly the municipals because they feel like they deserve to vote. Or they think that they should, they think that it's an election, why can't they vote? So I'm not saying that they think they deserve it. I think there's just confusion.
Right, there's confusion among other precincts on election day. It's not
Yeah.
just Collington that shows up at KDH. And, I mean, we get people from Southern Shores, we get people from Nags Head. It's the
Right.
early voting process, I think, that adds to a little bit of their confusion, that
Yes.
flexibility, which is not present on election day.
Yes, and so I think the big issue is the municipal, which we can do a banner. And then I think it's just having our poll workers continue to educate. Most of them receive the information very well. And in a municipal, you're not waiting in a long line. There's not a lot of traffic.
There
You
weren't a
walk
whole
right
lot of
up.
Voters.
Yes, exactly. So there again, I'm not even sure it's 100 voters. I think that's it. I'm not even sure it's 50.
Dare County has a citizens guide, or at least they used to. I don't know whether they still publish it.
They do.
Do we have a presence in that guide? As well.
There is election information in that guide.
And so would that be an opportunity to, perhaps we should review that information and see if there's any mention about the municipal elections? And
sure.
we could provide some additional advice there. The alternative is perhaps we could reach out to the municipals and negotiate with them to have a voter's guide for municipal elections. And in that brochure, provide guidance in terms of how a citizen were able to determine whether they were eligible to vote in that municipality.
I think that's a good idea. I think that spending money on a voter's guide that reaches, at least attempts to reach everyone, might be a better way to get the information out versus a sign that they may or may not come in contact with. So we could certainly look into that, and I can contact the organization that puts out the Citizens Guide and see if they would be willing to add in that information. I think I don't think we'd have a problem there.
Okay, anybody else?
Sounds like a good way to proceed.
Okay, I do like the running banner. They do catch your attention.
Okay, so to recap, we're going to try to add something a little more eye-catching on the website. We'll look into adding information in the Citizens Guide, and then perhaps even a voter's guide for munis. So we will work on that for next year's elections.
Okay. Excellent. Director's report.
Okay. The sample ballots and upcoming meetings for the March 3rd primary have been added to the website. Minutes and agendas from 2020 through 24 have also been added to our website. And hopefully soon we'll have 2025 to present added. And then from then on, we'll continue to update the minutes and the agendas on the website. That is something new that we've added. The North Carolina State Board of Elections Winter Conference will be held virtually January 26th and 27th. Staff and some of the board members have signed up to attend. I did send a tentative agenda through email. If you'd like a printed copy, just let me know. I can get you one of those. We will conduct logic and accuracy testing on January 23rd, beginning at 10 a.m. in the room 168 here in the admin building. That's really nothing different than what we always do. So we encourage board members to come and
When are you
participate.
doing that? I'm sorry.
That's going to be held on January the 23rd at 10 a.m.
It was really interesting. I went last year. And if anyone ever has concerns about whether or not the equipment functions as intended, it's a great opportunity to observe the process and to learn how carefully the operations of all those systems and machines are vetted prior to the elections. So it is a great opportunity.
And are we going to receive a link for this conference?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You'll get an email. So be looking emails for those of you who who I think Rebecca contacted everyone, so she has a list. I was out of the office Friday at a district meeting, so I'll get with her today, find out who wanted to attend, and register everyone today, and then you'll get your email with the link. The election notice has by statute been published in the Coastland Times and at the Dare County Courthouse. That began January the 14th. That in the paper will run through February 4th. Absentee ballots began to be mailed out and made available on January the 12th, 2026. Dare has mailed out 21 to date, 21 civilian and 1 overseas, and we have not received any voted ballots back. So Randy, you might want to write that in. That's not on your director's report, but those are the figures. 21 civilian, 1 overseas, and 0 voted back so far. The last day to request an absentee ballot is February the 17th at 5 p.m. Voter registration deadline is February the 6th at 5 p.m. So that would be the deadline to register or to make changes such as party affiliation. Early voting begins February 12th and it ends February the 28th. The next board meeting is also our first absentee meeting, which will be held at 3 p.m. on January 27th, 2026. Precinct official and chief judge trainings will be conducted the first week of February in Buxton and Manio, with the main training being held on February 4th and 5th at 10 a.m. here in Manio in the Board of Commissioners meeting room. As a reminder, these trainings are not open to the public. And then lastly, per board request at our Canvas meeting last November, a letter was drafted and mailed to the executive director of the North Carolina State Board of Elections, Sam Hayes, bringing to his attention the potential for a voter to take possession of the ballot at the ballot station and then ultimately return that ballot unvoted. The letter requested clear, uniform guidance on how such situations should be handled in the future. The state did send guidance out on Friday, January the 16th. It came through Parker Holland, who is the Deputy Director of Elections Administration. And it came in what they call EA team updates and reminders. We get them usually weekly or every couple of weeks when it gets to be election time. And under the heading of in-person voting, this was given. And it's under the heading active voting. Pursuant to 08 NCAC 10B.0104, the active voting has begun once a voter receives the ballot and has left the ballot table to mark the ballot. This is a situation that is not uncommon, particularly in nonpartisan and primary elections, and usually arises when a voter has not looked at their sample ballot before going to vote and sees their ballot for the first time when it's handed to them. The rule says that when they have been presented with, and that's in quotations, the ballot, then they have begun the act of voting. Our agency views that as one transaction encompassing the voter being handed the ballot and proceeding to move on from the ballot table to the voting booth. So that was the guidance that was handed down to us.
Although that
Here,
guidance really
copy that.
doesn't answer the question.
No,
I'll give
because
this to
if
you,
he stands at the voter booth and passes it back, he still has the issue.
No, you
Or-
can do that. No, what they're saying is if they turn away, if they don't turn away and they immediately hand it back, you can process it as a canceled ATV and a,
But they can't
Correct.
come back and vote.
That is how I'm interpreting, yes. If they do not leave the station and they hand it back to you, then it's a canceled ATV and it's a no vote, has not voted.
Right, so the place where we had asked for guidance was what happened between receipt and actual leaving of the voting area. And they said they have to proceed to a voting space in order to do that. If they don't proceed,
started out saying.
Yeah, so what they said is, and proceeding to move on
Turn away and proceed to move on.
from the ballot table.
So they don't have to get to the voting station.
It says, the sentence says proceeding to move on from the ballot table to the voting booth. So once they move into the direction of the voting booth, they have begun the act of voting according to the agency, which is not specifically in the code.
right, so they've created a muddy area between physically standing in front of an employee and whether or not they have turned towards the voting enclosure or not, as to whether or not our staff at the ballot location should be canceling that or allowing them to.
Yes.
But I think that we can give our poll workers clear guidance. If they don't turn away, do this. If they do turn away, do this. It makes it, I think we can make it more simple for them.
Mhm.
Because it's a murky answer.
It is a murky answer, but It's better, it's official, so this is what
It's
we
an
shall
official
do.
murky answer.
It's an
Right.
official murky.
So at least it's the answer that was given to every county.
Right.
So we have it in writing.
Mhm.
So if we follow that, I think
We're good.
we're good. I don't think that means that ultimately the board cannot still take up an issue if they wish to. But this is the guidance that was given.
So that ballot is spoiled, correct? If that's a canceled ATV.
Yes. So, correct. The ballot would ultimately be spoiled. Now, on election day, there's nothing on it. But during an early voting, for instance, there would be some information that's written on the ballot. So I think for uniformity's sake, for record purposes, the guidance should be for the precinct official to just mark it spoiled, because I think it should always be an incident report, regardless of which way. That way, there's documents and things that can be tangibly put together in the event that we had to have a discussion for some reason. It can be considered spoiled. But yes, that ballot would be spoiled. The ATV would be canceled. Now, I asked specifically, and I'll be happy to share the letter with all of you that I wrote. I did ask specifically for guidance on what to do with the ballot if it was an instance where we would keep the vote. So the person did move away and they get to the voting booth or halfway to the voting booth, and then they decide to come back. We would not cancel that ATV at that time, because according to this, we would consider that to have moved into that realm of voting. And in which case, what do we do with the ballot? And I was specific and said, do we keep the imbalance of numbers where the reconciliation is unbalanced, where we have one ATV or, versus no ballot? So there's a difference there, which is what we had at Canvas. Or is the ballot to be placed in the machine so that your numbers balance, a blank ballot? And if you look at the code, it appears to me that you can do that, the chief judge and the two judges, but that wasn't put in here. So what they didn't address is what you actually do in real time with the ballot.
That was my interpretation, that the ballot would be placed in the scanner. And the voter's record would reflect that they have
Yes.
cast a ballot. Well, obviously, there's no vote on the ballot, but they did cast the ballot.
Yeah.
But they didn't answer that question.
No,
Because
ma'am.
that was the question we had at Canvas, because the tapes would not reconcile
Correct.
as a result of that. But I believe, if I understand what you've read out, you didn't get a direction about what to do with the ballot, leaving us with the same inability to reconcile that we had
Right.
at the last election.
And what I think is, it seems to me that they are leaning more towards the incident being a canceled vote, so you wouldn't have a discrepancy. But unfortunately, it does leave hanging out there what you do in the event that they do make it to the booth before they look at it and then come back to you. And I think both scenarios can happen. And I think, it's likely, especially in a primary, where they think they're voting for one thing and they get their ballot and it's not there. And so I think either, I think we can make that decision that, as John said, I interpret it the same way, that a bipartisan team or the chief judge and two judges would insert that blank ballot into the tabulator, make it an incident report, with that ATV not being canceled, and with an explanation of who the voter was, that it was turned in. And that's why we also can go unreconciled. Unbalanced.
But where I see the situation developing is where a voter receives the ballot and proceeds to the voting booth, reviews the ballot. And as we have that scenario, the voter says, I don't know who these people are. I need to do some more research. So he goes back to registration to turn in that ballot and desires to be able to, essentially wipe the slate clean
And vote
and
again.
be able to come back at a later date or time, receive a new ballot, and cast his votes. And that, I think, is where we're going to run into contention with the voter. Because,
Well,
and what
unfortunately,
you laid
we-
out was, as long as they didn't turn away, they actually could do that. So it becomes a really fine line in terms of somebody being able to, because it sounded as though they could actually proceed to the voting booth, but if they
No,
turned back to the registration desk, they could turn it in.
No.
If,
it just says
So you're-
proceed to move on. Again, it's not very detailed. And I think, unfortunately, I think that's why the determination that the board came up with at Canvas made more sense, because it didn't allow for so much gray area. Is it one step? Is it 4 steps?
mhm.
Some people's voting booths are halfway across the room.
I would go back and say this is an unsatisfactory answer. We need clear guidance on this matter.
Okay.
Because I can see this situation devolving into, it's going to be the judge's discretion as
But we
to-
also have the code that says, once you take possession of the ballot, you voted. And so you do have the code that backs you up. So if you take what the code has and what the state gives, I think in most scenarios, you should be able to make a determination. But I will do whatever the board requests.
It does happen, John, but it's not as frequent as you might think. We need to make sure that precincts display their sample ballots prominently, especially this time, because there are a couple races that are going to cause concern for people who come in and cannot vote them. And they may not realize that until they get up there. So it may be a little more common this time, but it's not a huge problem. It doesn't happen very often.
And they may want to come back and vote again, but the code is clear. If they walked away,
then
then they'd certainly have taken possession of the ballot.
I would recommend that we provide some kind of notification as they're approaching the registration desk, so that they understand that when they receive that ballot, there's no going back, in
Okay.
essence. They don't get to come back for another chance at bat, so to speak.
So are you suggesting, John, that we want the staff to be saying to the voters,
No, we could place a sign,
That-
some
that
some
says-
notification.
if you take possession of your ballot, you will be deemed to have voted whether or not you actually fill in any of the circles?
I think if you do that, you are going to create more problems than you solve, unfortunately. There's a lot of information that voters take in when they walk into a voting place. There's a lot of information that is posted. And they don't, for instance, it is posted that you must, under North Carolina law, state your name and address out loud. And people will lean over the counter and they will whisper because they think that it's private. And the sign is right there. So the more signs that you have up, unfortunately, the less likely they are to read it. I agree with you that the murkiness can be problematic, but I think if sample ballots are displayed prominently, as they should be anyway, maybe we can head some of this off. I don't know. There's no easy answer. What I can tell you is that the auditor's office, and this was going to be in my remarks, they are in the process of reviewing the code and the numbered memos. They don't like the numbered memos because there's a lot of back and forth and contradiction, and it's a strange system. And so that was one of the reasons that we jumped on this when we did with the letter, to get in there while they're reviewing these things. So I'm kind of hoping they have not responded formally to Kelly's letter or my email that went with it. I'm hoping that they will look further into it in this process. I can't swear to that, but I can tell you that that's their plan, to review the code as it applies, the administrative code as it applies to voting, and the numbered memo system. So I don't know if that helps.
If I could offer, perhaps, especially in a primary, we aren't always as busy as some of, like a general. Perhaps we could have the chief, or if some of our precincts, if we're staffed kind of heavy, maybe make an announcement periodically if there's a line and ask, just sort of ask the voters, have you reviewed the sample ballot? Make sure that the sample ballots are on a table either before they enter or as soon as they enter. Most of our precincts, that's how it should be. So I will make sure that they are available. For instance, here in Manio, we have a table of sample ballots before you even enter. So in the area of the lobby, before you even walk in the doors, is a sample, so that they can stop and look before they even get into the line or the actual room. We don't have that luxury in every site, but I think we can do something where maybe we can prompt voters to look at the sample prior to checking in. And I think if that becomes a practice one time and you see that ballot and you're like, oh my goodness, this is not what I thought I was voting for, maybe that will prompt you in the future. I better look at my ballot, a sample, before voting, because they may be surprised that what they think is on it isn't. And they are absolutely on our website main page. As soon as you go there, you can click and see a sample ballot. PR is putting information out about the election and where to go to see if you're registered, to see your sample. So we can at least try to, throughout the day, especially in the early voting sites, prompt people to look before they vote.
And you might think about whether or not, when you talk to some of the locations where they don't necessarily have the space and the luxury to do
Mhm.
that, to just make sure that whoever is setting up those
Mhm.
precincts has a place where those sample ballots can be received and reviewed
Mhm.
physically before they get into, a place where there's no turning back. Some of those voting places are a little bit
Small.
difficult in terms of the layouts to
Mhm.
have the sample ballots out
Yeah.
someplace if there aren't people out there.
And Sandy, I could ask your opinion on this. What do you think about maybe even posting the samples at the check-in station instead of a sign, just forcing them to kind of look at that bright gold paper? Do you think that would?
I don't think it would hurt, and it
Okay.
might help. There are already, I don't know about other places. In KDH, there are 2 signs when you come up.
Mhm.
One is the state your name, in English and Spanish. The other is
You certify.
right, that
Yes.
today, when you sign this, you
Yeah.
certify these things.
Mhm.
So you can read them all in advance. No one does. But especially what you're certifying part. So a third one, I mean, if we don't have,
Yeah.
like at a municipal where you have all of these ballots, but just putting how
Mhm.
many are there? 3?
3.
Okay.
Mhm. So at least in this election, it's not so many that we can't.
Right.
Mhm.
So I don't think there could be a problem, and it might help. It might catch their attention because it should be different.
Okay.
And they are bright.
So would you like for me to go back to the state on this, or and again, as I said in November, I'll recommend again, you may get better answers as a board member going to the state board members or the executive director. I sent
I
the
don't know
letter, but I
about
didn't
that.
get anything directly back to me. This is what I got. And so, for more clarification, you may get a little further than me.
Well, I think one of the difficulties is you didn't get a legal answer. Okay, and I think you probably didn't get a legal answer for a reason, which is it's a murky area where nobody wants to come out and say 2 feet beyond the desk is at the voting enclosure, but 1 foot out of the desk is not. So I don't think you're going to get a legal answer that
Mhm.
gives you a proximity determiner that will be any better than an adjective or an adverb as to close or something else equally
Mhm.
murky. I think given the variety of voting locations, it's unlikely that anyone's going to want to opine as to proximity, just because there are so many different setups.
Agree.
So while I would hope for greater clarity from the state, I think sometimes the response you get indicates what they're willing to do.
Mhm.
Because if there had been a bright line where somebody said, well, we're going to say when you go 2 feet beyond the desk, you're in the voting enclosure, even though the voting enclosure is 10 feet away,
Mhm.
you might have gotten that kind of an answer. So I'm not really sure if a follow-up will get us any more. I think this is probably an indication of the fact that it's a murky area with a lot of different geographical setups that nobody wants to make a bright line test as to that.
So I've been trying to put on my voter hat, and if an individual comes in, goes through the line, gets the ballot, and for whatever reason does not cast it, are they, at what point, how many feet away are they then prohibited from coming back and voting later?
Again, that is really the big question. And so we just have to take the guidance we were given, which says, and proceeding to move on from the ballot table. So at that point, I think the person interacting, the precinct official that's interacting at the ballot station would have to let the chief judge and ultimately myself know their interpretation of what happened, which was, did this voter proceed to move on, or did they stand there and then hand it back in? So at that point, we would have to take the interpretation of the precinct official and what happened. That needs to be entered into an official incident report. And then that determination would be made. They would contact me. That would be made that either the vote stands or it doesn't. So unfortunately, I don't know. I don't think that we should, as Karen said, box it into steps away, because geographically every site is different. And you can get into probably more mud than if you just stayed with the simple terms of proceeding to move on, which would be you voting, which would be you beginning the act of voting. You've got it and you're proceeding to move on. At that point is when you would be considered in the act of voting. And they put that, they put presented with the ballot in quotations, and they have begun the act of voting. Our agency views that as one transaction encompassing what they're saying, 2 things. They're being given the ballot and they have to proceed to move on from the ballot station.
Right, so I think what we're asking our staff to interpret is what position, body-wise, intent-wise, they are looking at when they pick up that ballot. Because in Duck, it's a very short distance from the table to the voting enclosure. In Manio, it's a number of steps before you get from a registration table to the voting enclosure. So I think what we're asking our staff to do is to say, somebody picks it up, looks at it and says, geez, I don't know what I'm doing. if they haven't proceeded to vote, they should be allowed to vote again.
Correct.
If they've walked towards the voting enclosure, like, I'm going to do this, and then they stop at some point and say, I don't know these people, they will have gone further along in the demonstration of intent to vote. And I think the state is saying when you get further along in that process, you're cooked. You don't have another chance.
Yes.
But if you pick it up and you're still at the table, you look down and say, I don't see it, you have the chance
Mhm.
to turn back and say no.
And where we're going to find that voter who's upset with that is the ones that move further away and is told, you've taken possession of the ballot. I'm sorry, this was your act of voting. You voted. But but at that point, we do have the administrative code to back us up, because it's pretty clear that if you take possession, so actually the state's giving a little more leeway for some. So, even if we do run into that situation where we have a disgruntled voter, unfortunately, we've got law on our side, not just state interpretation. So, and the ones that are allowed to return it are going to be happy, I think, with the
Have an
option.
opportunity to come back and vote again.
Yes, ma'am.
I think the important part is just in terms of making sure the staff understand the importance of their incident reports.
Yes.
Sometimes the incident reports are pretty skimpy
Mhm.
in terms of trying to understand what it was the officials and the judges looked at the time.
Yeah, the chief really should be, a chief or a judge should be completing the incident report. And ideally, the chief should do it.
Okay.
I think it's
In a murky situation.
very important. And the incident report that we received with this voting transaction in question was very poorly written and not helpful at all. So they're not ever taught, but that's something definitely in chief's training that needs to be gone over.
Okay.
Because that would have helped us in deciding when we were looking at that
Yep.
situation, if we had had a better sense of what had actually transpired, I think we wouldn't have been quite as caught in the throes of trying to interpret something from very little
Right.
guidance from the incident.
Mhm.
And I think that's where we are. So I think the state has given the voter an opportunity, if they don't go too far along in the process, to come back. But if they go too far, then they aren't going to get that opportunity. So we really need to have some representation of where they are and what they do.
Make sure that the sample ballots are at the ballot station too. Posted at the ballot station at check-in and the ballot station.
Okay.
In the interests of further confusion,
Thank you.
it seems to me that the clarity we have received would really require a sign to the voter as they enter. Once you take that ballot, you have voted, period. Because we're not going to go measuring steps in East Lake compared to Manteo to compare, some other place.
That's what I was after.
I mean, I think that's the only way to,
It makes it simpler.
Before you hand the ballot to the voter, is say, be certain that you're prepared to cast this ballot. If you're not certain, then don't take possession of the ballot.
You need to be very careful.
I think you have to be
You need to be very careful.
because we're putting things that aren't necessarily legal. Now, what I can do is print the code, I guess, and post that somewhere. But I can't actually say once you take the possession of the ballot, you voted, because that's not what the state says. The state says if you take it and you don't like what you see and you hand it immediately back, then you haven't voted. So again, we've just put ourselves in a position where
Well, however you want to phrase it, all I'm saying.
but that is the whole point, is how do you
advising-
phrase it?
Advising the voter of their rights with respect to taking possession of the ballot. And that there's fundamentally two outcomes. They can either hand the ballot back before leaving the ballot table, or they can move on. If they move on, they're voting.
I don't think it's quite that hard a line, John, between what they do at the table, because they can stop in their tracks and look. So I feel that it's
Well, that's what
more
I said.
difficult to post the sign without sounding,
Well-
kind of threatening about, if you,
You
if you
have,
aren't prepared to vote, don't pick up that ballot.
I mean, but at what point do we, I mean, at some point, what point do we not put some of the responsibility on the voter? Because we can't hold their hand through the entire process.
If we can't claw our way through this mud, then why do we expect the voter to be able to, once they're in that situation,
Okay.
be able to process rationally why their preferred outcome isn't the one that would occur
because, first of all,
because
This-
it's government?
this is a whole process where it's a pretty heavy responsibility.
Mm.
Voters do not always take it that way. There is a process they go through where they are required to attest to certain items that are very important. And everything on this document that they're signing is telling them that they are there to vote. Now, unfortunately, there are voters who come and they have no idea. They just happen to see a sign and they walk in, and that's unfortunate. But I don't think that there are any number of signs or postings or PSAs on this planet that is going to change that, because as stated earlier, the more you have out there, the less likely they are to read it. And I can vouch for that 100%. And I understand what you're saying. But at the end of the day, we are talking about one incident, one. So you can't override a process that works very well for the most part because of a single incident. The other thing is that when you are instructing voters, and in KDH, there is a speech when a ballot is handed to someone about how to fill it out, because that's another issue. You cannot test voters. You cannot really school them beyond a certain point. And so when you make this, this threatening announcement that once you take this, you're cooked, it's not a good look. I think that it's going to create a lot more problems than it solves. And as I said, at the end of the day, this is one incident out of thousands of votes. So
And it would be coming up with the language to say it just right so that someone interprets it correctly. I mean, we have voters that are inactive, and we still don't use that word because that is a in-house word. It doesn't mean what it comes out to mean. So we say, update, because that's more realistic to the interpretation of inactive as far as their registration goes. And so, we would have to really pour over the verbiage to make sure that it's understandable to everyone. And again, you're asking precinct officials to do a bunch of really important steps to make sure that this vote is done correctly and legally, and you're throwing something on it.
I'm a little concerned that we're going to create something beyond what the law and the guidance has said at this point.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going to reiterate my point. Sometimes you get an ambiguous answer because you have to be prepared to deal with ambiguity. What I think we should do as a board is school our staff and prepare our workplaces in the way to encourage as clear a response as possible from voters, understanding that everybody comes to the voting place differently. And I don't think that we can come up with a way to be more definitive than the state has without putting our county at peril of acting differently than other counties.
I agree. And so I think the big takeaway would be to have our precinct officials document the incident as, detailed as possible.
And to be aware of where the circumstances start to arise so they're paying attention
Mhm.
in that moment. Because there are, as Sandy said, very few of these incidents, But for those who are barred from voting, it can be something that will be a festering problem.
Mhm.
So I think it's just a raising the awareness of those folks so that at that moment where someone seems uncertain, they understand or they are advised in that moment, you have to be prepared to vote. Once you start, you're deemed to have voted.
Mhm.
We could pass out the state response to your inquiry.
And have them sign it.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
Or wrap their gun in it.
Oh, gee. Okay, and I will say that I have not received a response, and a formal response, and Kelly has not received a formal response to this letter, so it may still be forthcoming. And if we continue to encounter problems, then we can push to have them lead us down the proper trail. I think we just need to wait and see what happens.
And train our folks so that they know.
I think, and most of it is handled as in a matter of course, and will continue to be. You just need to be very careful of any perception that someone's not going to be allowed to vote. That is one of the biggest bad things you can possibly do.
Yeah.
Or to just, you don't want to threaten them. I
wasn't suggesting.
agreed, but the language is,
Yeah.
like,
Intimidating.
It has to be wordsmith if you're going to do that.
so we'll play it by ear and see if we need to take another step. Is that?
Well, I think we'll beef up our training a little bit so that
Yes.
people are prepared. We've talked about making sure we have the available samples in a place.
Mhm.
And then hopefully people will be more interested in this election
Mhm.
as it comes up.
There's a lot of
Even-
information going on Facebook that they are going to walk into a situation they may not expect. So when it comes to candidates and what ballots they're on, and hopefully that will help as well. Okay, anything else on that?
That's all I have.
On December 17th, I went to Raleigh and there was a chiefs training meeting. They did 6 or 7 of them throughout the state. As I mentioned before, they advised us that they are going over the numbered memos, going over the administrative code to make corrections and streamline it where necessary. So that is an ongoing process. Earlier this month, I got information from the auditor, and then it became public after they told us to not tell anyone about this. But it's a further registration repair. They are looking into campus addresses. There's concern about residence addresses as opposed to campus addresses, and they're finding a lot of generalized college mailing addresses as residents with no dorms, no rooms, no nothing. So that's another thing that they're looking into right now. They have great plans, and we'll see how far they get. But that was an interesting day. It was a long drive to and from, and I'm glad it's done a week before Christmas. So anyway, I have to have another knee surgery, and so for the foreseeable future, I will be participating remotely. I don't take narcotics, so hopefully I will be clear. And it may end up that it may not keep me away for long, but there is that possibility. So
When are you scheduled?
Thursday. Yes. And I think that that's all I have. Does anyone have anything else? All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thursday.